Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a review of A Shadow in Summer by Daniel Abraham. This is the first book in the Long Price Quartet. I've been told by many of my friends to read this book and I decided to take the plunge and I just randomly started it one evening. I had finished my previous book, I'd finished another book, and I just did not feel like reading anything that I had on my TBR. So I picked up the first book. Well, I have the omnibus edition and I started the first book and I have to say it was a journey. I really enjoyed this book. I'm just going to read a synopsis of the first book. In a world of ancient empires and immortal magics, one man stands at the crossroads of history. Ota Machai, I think that's how you pronounce it, the neglected son of a political leader, once thought to be the great hope of the school of poets protecting the Kai Empire, now spends his days working as a manual labourer under an assumed name. Caught between ancient wonders and a modern empire, Ota wants nothing more than the normalcy of a mundane existence and the love of the beautiful Liat. Enter the Golds, a juggernaut of an empire committed to laying waste to all lands with their ferocious army. Now, all depends on Ota, and the choices made by the ones he loves most will save the world or lead to its ruin. With wonderful storytelling, Abraham, co-author of the Expanse series, weaves unique magic, high-stakes betrayal, and political intrigue in an action-packed epic fantasy. Sounds amazing, right? I'm going to go into now what I really liked about it, and then what might not work necessarily for other people. I think at its core, this book is a very character-centric story. From what I understand, all the books are like that. And it is a little bit slower than some of the other fantasy that I love and I enjoy. And that's okay though. It kind of worked for me. And I kind of like the fact that it eased me into it and that I was getting a lot of familiarity with the world and the characters. And, you know, the plot felt developed and I really like that. So let's dig into a little bit more detail. Let's kick off with characters. So if you've been watching my channel for a while now, you'll probably guess by now that characters are, to me, the most important aspect of a story. The plot is obviously important too, but as long as I can buy into the characters, I would much rather read a book about good characters, well-characterized individuals with a weaker plot rather than a weak plot and poor characters. I've read many books like that where the plot is really strong, but the characters just can't carry the story forward. And, you know, as a result, I've given it a low rating or I've, you know, decided not to continue on with the series. This book kind of has a bit of both. And he actually Abraham reminds me a little bit of Abercrombie in the way that, yes, characters are obviously very central to his story, but the seeds are being sown. And I have a really, really strong feeling that the plot is really going to come into its own in the second book and the third and the fourth. And so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the fact that the story is a little bit slower as long as we get that payoff at the end, which from what I've heard, we definitely do. So the character work is fantastic. You know, we follow a couple of different perspectives. My favorite perspective is the main kind of perspective that you follow. I mean, I would say there is maybe one main perspective. Every single perspective is interesting. Not, you know, typically when you have a multi-POV story, you always have, you know, one or two that are a little bit meh and then the others are really good. Or you have like one that is amazing and then the rest are really average. Every single POV in this story I really enjoyed. I did have one favorite one, and that is the perspective of Ota. I really also enjoyed the perspective of Marty. I think their interactions and their friendship is really interesting, and I like seeing how they perceived each other from the other one's perspective. And Ota in particular, I mean, I have a theory about who he's going to become and what he's going to achieve. There's something about Ota that I really like, and that is that he's quietly rebellious in a way. And I really like that feature in my characters, not where they're this kind of loud-mouthed, very opinionated kind of hero. I like it when they're a little bit quieter, they're a little bit more introverted. Their power relies on them being that type of person rather than being like a loudmouth, essentially. And I think Ota as well, like, you know, from where we start with him at the beginning of the book to where we finish with him at the end of the first book, his arc is really good. It's not as if like massive changes necessarily happen to his character, but he's slowly and subtly changing in ways that we really begin to realize at the end of the book. And I really, really love that. Marty is quite similar in certain ways. You know, he starts off as this very, you know, not very, but quite shy individual. And then we start to see him grow in confidence as he learns more about the world and more about the magic system and what is expected of him as he continues to learn how to become a poet and how to master the magic system in this world, which I'll come on to in a second. Marty is he reminds me of kind of like that friend that everybody wants. You know, he's quite quiet, quite reserved, but there's something about him. I don't know what it is, but there's something about him that I really like. And as I mentioned, I really like Marty and Otar's connection and the way that their friendship developed and how that shapes up at the end of the first book. So the characters were really great. We also do follow two female perspectives. I really enjoyed them as well. I didn't enjoy them as much as the two main perspectives, but they were I looked forward to reading them. And I think Abraham writes female characters really well. It never felt forced. It never felt like he was trying to make these women into something that they were not. And even though I preferred Marty and Ota's chapters, I did really like those perspectives as well. The next thing I really enjoyed was the magic system. The magic system is really unique. We don't really understand that much about it in the first book. I suspect we'll learn more about it in the second book. I've actually recently started the second book and I'm only a couple of chapters in, but I have a feeling that we're going to start to learn more about the magic system and how that has developed and how to master it and all of those fun things. But the magic system is very unique. This whole concept of essentially putting your own thoughts, almost. I don't really know how to describe it. It's such a weird magic system and I'm not going to do it justice, but essentially, you know, you have these people called poets and they are the people that command the magic, and they are able to essentially develop kind of thoughts which they can then instill in another being, almost. I've definitely totally butchered that, but if you've read this book, you'll kind of know what I'm talking about, and you're probably laughing at how bad my explanation of the magic system is. But they are then realized into these almost like spirits, but they take human form, and they're called the Andat. It's really interesting the relationship that the poet has with the Andat, because the Andat essentially takes on some of the poet's character. And it's almost like yin and yang. You kind of have the yin, which is the poet. They are the person who's controlling. And then you have the yang, which is the Andat, which is essentially controlled by the poet. If the poet dies or if something happens to the poet, the Andat also dies. So it's very much a symbiotic relationship. So the magic system is very unique. I really like the fact that it's kind of connected to a human, and that you have these two pieces of the puzzle that have to work together to essentially fulfill what the magic they embody is. It varies very much Andat to Andat, and the Andat play a really key role. The poets and the Andat play a really key role in sustaining life in the cities that they live in. So that's very cool. The magic system, I'll be completely honest with you, I don't think I necessarily have tons of knowledge about it after just reading the first book, but I'm hoping that particularly in the second book, we learn more about it. And I have a feeling we will, because of the direction that the book is going in. So I'm excited about that. The third thing that I really appreciated actually was the world building. I'm not really a huge world building person. If it's there and it's done well, I will appreciate it, but it's not necessarily something that I look out for. But we are in kind of various city states, and you get a really nice visualization of what these towns and these cities look like. There are like sentences about when, you know, Ota is walking in the streets of Saraket, and you really get a sense of what Saraket is like. It's one of the main places that the first book is based in. You get a really beautiful, vivid image of what that city state is actually like. And I really like it when an author can do that, but more importantly, when they don't info dump, when it's not too much wishy-washy, flowery prose. I really, really don't like that. The way that I think about his world building is it's maybe 1 or 2 steps above Abercrombie, but it's not as intense as like a Robert Jordan. I think Robert Jordan's descriptions they're beautiful, don't get me wrong, but you don't want to hear about the buttons on a coat, like, no offense. I mean, if you do, good for you, but I don't. And I think he strikes a really nice balance of giving you the context of the world that you're in without making it feel like a chore, which is sometimes how I felt with the first book in the Wheel of Time series. There's honestly so many good things about this book. There's maybe 1 or 2 small little things that other people might have issues with, but I actually didn't mind them, which I'll come on to in a second. But the other thing that I really love is that his writing is just beautiful. It flows really beautifully. That's really important to me. I really hate feeling like I'm out of a narrative, and I never felt like that once while I was reading this book. That being said, one of the things that I have noticed as I read Abraham's writing, I can't read more than a couple of chapters at a time. I'm curious if anyone's read this book and whether they had the same thing. It's not that the writing is like dense or anything. It's just that I feel like I need to pay attention. And when I'm paying such attention to this type of book, I don't really want to read more than, you know, three or four chapters maximum, because I actually I want the information to sink into my head so that I can really appreciate the direction of the story and the plot and the characters and all of that fun stuff. That's not necessarily a downside. It's actually a good thing for me because it means that I then don't feel the pressure to binge. I've actually just been giving myself a target of 2 chapters maximum a day. And then I, you know, depending on how tired I am, I'll read at least a minimum of 1. And then if I'm focused and not too tired, I'll read 2. But yeah, the writing is beautiful. His descriptions are amazing. And I really like that he creates this really vivid world, and I really enjoyed it. I think he's done an amazing job of writing a world that feels alive. The last thing that I really enjoyed was the fact that even though this is a slow start, and this will definitely be a negative for a lot of people, and I'll come on to that in a second, I really like the fact that the book is essentially a build-up. You know, I've recently started the second book, as I mentioned earlier, and, you know, it's kicked off a little bit more faster, and I can really start to see that it's going to pick up now, which I'm really looking forward to. I like the fact that the book was setting the scene and was giving us the introductions to the characters. I don't mind that as long as then, like I said before, that pays off, and I have a really strong feeling that it is going to pay off. Again, it kind of reminds me of Abercrombie a little bit, where, you know, the Blade itself is very much just setting the scene, getting familiar with the characters in the world, and then book 2 and 3 just start off with a bang. I mean, obviously this is a quartet, so I expect book 2 to maybe go a little bit slower than maybe book 2 of the First Law trilogy. But I'm really liking it. I really like the fact that we've got this holistic picture of the world in book 1, and now in book 2 we're really starting to kind of pick things up, and the plot pieces are moving together, which is really nice. In terms of what might be an issue for some people, it is a very slow book. If you don't like slow books, if you need action, if you need momentum, this is probably not going to be for you. Obviously, as I go through reading the other 3 books, I will keep you guys posted and let you know how the pacing, you know, improves or how it develops, so that you can get a sense of whether the payoff will be worth it for you. But like I said before, I don't mind the slow start because I just have a feeling that it's going to be amazing. But if you don't like slow starts, if you like having tons of stuff happening, you know, it's not necessarily gonna be the book for you. The other thing is, and again, it's kind of tied to this, because this book is about a lot of context setting, I didn't really know what was going on for the first like half of the book. It's not really clear where the plot is going. I mean, you have a sense of where it could go, but you're not being told it. Abraham is expecting you to kind of pull together certain things, which is fine. But if you're the sort of reader that likes to be told what is going on, then again, this might not be the book for you. I don't mind that. I just have to be in the right frame of mind. Thankfully, I am in the right frame of mind for this book, so it's really working for me. But again, if you like to kind of see what's happening on the page and it's very obvious, or not necessarily very obvious, but it's obvious, then again, you might struggle with this one. So overall, I ended up rating this book a 4.5 stars. You're probably wondering why I didn't give it 5. I just have a feeling that book 2 is going to be a 5 stars for me. And I know that's maybe not a good reason why you should rate a book 4.5 stars. Not necessarily good to kind of hedge. But I don't know. I feel like there was maybe something a little bit missing, and that was maybe the plot moving forward a little bit. But now that I'm reading the second book, I can already see the things that I thought were lacking in book 1, which again were very, very small things for me, are being shown and made up for in book 2. So that's why I gave it a 4.5. You know, I rounded up to a 5 stars on Goodreads because I think Abraham deserves the recognition and the 5 stars. But it's a fantastic book, and it is a world that is really unique. I love his writing style. His characters are fantastic. And it's just a good all-rounder. It's one of those books that just feels very fleshed out and very intentional. So definitely go and pick it up. If you've read this book, please let me know your thoughts down below. Please try and avoid spoiling future books because I really don't want to know what happens. I really want to discover it for myself. But if you have read it, let me know. And please let me know who your favorite character is as well, specifically in the first book. Again, don't necessarily tell me how that changes because I don't want it to get spoiled. But I am definitely excited to talk about this one because it's had so much hype for me. And I'm just very, very excited to continue on the series. I will be reading the entire series in the month of November. It is the series that I'm going to be taking with me to the US as I travel, and I'm very excited to read it. I just think it's going to be a really fun time. So that's it for today, folks. I hope you enjoy this review. Let's take the conversation down below, and I will see you in the next video. Hope you have a lovely day, stay safe, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.